Welcome to my For a Dear Mother online card class with Katelyn Grosart, featuring products from Emerald Creek Craft Supplies. In today's class you're going to learn how to create this pretty Mother's Day card. You don't have to use it for a Mother's Day card. You could use it for a birthday, a sympathy card, just because card. Many adaptations that you can make to it. It's just for this class we're going to use it as a Mother's Day card. So let's get started. And I'll share with you which supplies you're going to need to use. So you're going to need the White Wonder Molten Dimensions embossing powder from Eileen Hall, available at Emerald Creek Craft Supplies. You'll also need the Gothic Black Modern Gilding powder. This is by Quiet Fire Design, also available at Emerald Creek Craft Supplies. Rose quartz gemstones, the freshly picked rose stamp, and it's a beautiful, quite a large stamp, but perfect for adding to any card. You'll also need the For a Dear Mother stamp, and that's just the sentiment. It's quite a large sentiment, that's why I cut it up in strips. And then the other stamp you'll need, which is also from Emerald Creek, is the flower collage stamp. And if you don't have the flower collage stamp in your collection and you don't want to purchase it, you can use any flower stamp that you have, as well as I'll give you an alternative of another way that you can create a background. The other supplies you're going to need are Distress Oxide ink in Spun Sugar, Distress Oxide ink in Black Soot. My choice for coloring the rose in is using Dina Wakley's Scribble Sticks in Evergreen and Blushing. You can also use watercolors, pencil crayons, markers, whatever your favorite coloring medium is, you can use that. And when I use the Scribble Sticks, I also use them with a water brush. And then you're going to want some of the beautiful digital download papers that are available from Emerald Creek Craft Supplies, and these are designed by Pam Bray. Edge distresser, scissors, Versamark ink or Emboss It ink, whatever you like to use as an embossing powder ink, you'll use that. And then you'll also just need some basic adhesives. So foam squares, I like Suquang tape, but you could use Easy Runner, any kind of dry adhesive, as well as a liquid glue. Whatever your chosen liquid glue is, that's perfect. So let's get started creating the card. So to start, I have die cut all my pieces so far. I like to use some of the stitched dies from Elizabeth Craft Designs, but you can use whichever dies that you want. This is a 3-inch stitched oval, and I've also done it in one of the digital downloads. So if you don't have a stamp that you can use to create the embossed background, you can just use a pattern paper piece. You're also going to want a 3¼ inch scallop circle, and this one I die cut out of one of the digital downloads from Pam Bray. A 4-inch stitched rectangle, which is also from Pam Bray's digital pattern paper collection. And then a 4½ inch stitched rectangle, which is just done die cut out of white cardstock. Pretty straightforward. And you're also going to want a couple of scrap papers. So to start, we're going to apply Versamark ink to the freshly picked rose stamp. And just stamp that onto a piece of white cardstock. And then take the Modern Gilding Gothic Black embossing powder, and I just like to put it on a piece of paper to sprinkle the powder on. Tap off the excess powder pop it back in your jar before we move on, so you know that you're not going to be spilling that powder. And then emboss with a heat tool. And for those who don't want to necessarily invest in the stamp, we do have this available as a digital download. So if you do decide to download it, you won't need to worry about doing the embossing powder step. This is if you buy the stamp itself, then you'll want to do the stamping with the embossing powder. And now I'm just going to use my water brush and the 2 scribble sticks to color in the rose. I'm going to start with the blushing color, and we'll do the rose flower itself. And when I color, I just color. I'm not a great shader, so I just color and add dark spots where I want until I'm happy with how the rose looks. And then once the flower petals are colored in, we will color in the leaves using the evergreen scribble stick. Okay, so now that the flower has been colored, I'm just going to quickly go over it with my heat tool. This way I know that the coloring that we've done is dry and I won't smudge it while I'm cutting it out. So now what I'll do is I will fussy cut the flower out. And then you just want to set your flower off to the side as we're finished with that step. Now with the other piece of scrap white paper that we have, we're going to take the For a Dear Mother stamp and apply the Spun Sugar Distress ink to the stamp. And then stamp it onto this piece of scrap paper. And if you do it as a digital download, of course it won't be pink, but that's still fine. And you'll just cut it out, so you don't have to worry about doing the stamping on this step. And with it being stamped and it being a Distress Oxide ink, I just want to make sure that it's dry before I start cutting it out. So I'm just going to dry it with my heat tool. So then, now I'm just going to fussy cut the For a Dear Mother sentiment out. And what it'll do is it'll end up being in 4 different strips. So now we'll cut. Okay, so we'll just push off the excess fussy cutting scraps that we have there, and now we have the For a Dear Mother sentiment, and we're just going to set that off to the side where we have our freshly picked rose. And if you have a flower stamp that you want to use, we can start by doing the background on the oval here. If you don't have a flower stamp, don't worry, you'll just use a pattern paper. And so what you'll do is you want to apply the Versamark ink or whatever embossing ink you're using to the floral collage stamp, and just stamp it onto your oval. Remove that. This time we're going to be using the White Wonder embossing powder, and you'll just sprinkle that over top of your stamped image on the oval. Tap that off, and we'll dump the powder back into the jar before moving on so we don't blow it everywhere. Okay, and now we will emboss the oval with your heat tool. Okay, and then there's the oval embossed, and it just gives the oval just a nice slight pattern. It's not in your face, but it's still there. Now we're going to move on to the assembly of the card. But before we start doing that, I always like to finish the edges of the pieces that I've been working on. So what we're going to do is we'll distress the edges of both stitched rectangles, the scalloped oval piece, and the stitched oval. And it doesn't matter which one you use, if you decide to use your flower one or if you decide to use a pattern paper one, doesn't matter. Just one of those ovals will need to be distressed. And this is the little distressing tool I like to use. So because I have my floral collage oval, I'm not going to worry about my pattern paper oval. So I'm just going to set that one off to the side. So we'll distress all these pieces. with the edges now distressed, we'll ink the edges, and I'm going to use the Distress Oxide ink in Black Soot with a blending tool with a piece of foam on it. And you'll just do the edges. This way you don't have any white edges when your card is finished. And it just gives it a nice finished look. So you'll do that with all of the pieces. And the only piece that you won't ink the edges on are the sentiments. So if you use the For a Dear Mother, you won't worry about that. Or if you use Happy Birthday, you won't worry about those edges. And then I'm also going to do the edges of the rose as best as possible. And we do want to get into that little area that we fussy cut out. Okay, so now what we'll do is assemble our card. So to start, you're going to want to adhere the 4-inch pattern paper piece to the 4.5-inch regular white cardstock rectangle. And I'm just going to use Suquang tape, but you can use whichever tape that you are most comfortable with. And you'll adhere that to the 4.5-inch rectangle. Okay. And then I'm going to adhere the 3-inch stitched oval to the 3.25-inch scalloped oval. And then use your foam squares to adhere the scalloped oval to the 4-inch stitched rectangle. And then I used foam squares on the rose, so you'll want to add some to that. And then we're going to adhere it onto the 3-inch stitched oval as desired. So I put mine on the right hand side of the oval, but you can have it on the left. It doesn't matter, whatever you would like. And then for adhering For a Dear Mother, I like to place it on my card first to kind of figure out where I want the words to sit. And then once I've figured that out, then what I'll do is I'll adhere them using the glue. And you can use whichever glue you prefer. Okay, so while the sentiment is drying, we'll just set that off to the side. And you want to cut a card base that is 5 3/4 by 9 inches. And you're going to score at 4.5 inches. So you want to fold that in half. And then I just use Suquang tape to put my card front to my card base. And go ahead and adhere your card front to your card base. And then to finish the card, I'm just going to use some of the rose quartz gemstones, and I'll dump them out in my hand. And then just kind of decide what size you want to use. I'm going to put 2 down at the bottom left-hand corner. And I just like to put a couple dots of glue down first, and then pick my gemstones and just place them on. And the beauty about these gemstones is that they aren't all the same size, so it gives you quite a variety in the sizes that you can use. And then in the top right corner, we're going to put 3 dots this time on the 4-inch rectangle and add the 3 gemstones. And there you go. There's your finished For a Dear Mother card. Thanks so much for joining me today and creating this For a Dear Mother card. We hope that this has inspired you to recreate more for other occasions. Thanks again, and we look forward to crafting with you again.